welcome back to another episode of The High Ground, powered by Premier Companies. And with us today in the podcast room at Premier Ag Corporate Headquarters, this is Sal speaking, and Jeff Jarrett, Vice President of Crop Nutrients and Operations at Premier Ag. And also, we've got a guest, these are all excellent episodes, but today, very timely with the topic. We're going to introduce Josh Linville with StoneX, and I'm going to hand it to you, Jeff, because you all used to work together, right?
We did. Thanks, Sal. Glad to be back. Glad that Josh could join us. He's traveling. He's at the Commodity Classic this week. So he's coming to us live from New Orleans. And so I'm sure anybody at the Commodity Classic will have a great time hooking up with Josh and learning from him. But we want to get Josh on here and have him wow us with all the information that he knows about fertilizer. So, Josh, how are you this morning?
I'm doing good. It's except I'm running a little bit less sleep than what I'd like. It's not that I was out partying. I was actually at my computer working well into the evening last night. Turns out my room is literally across the street from a club. So I got to go to sleep to the sound of gooch, gooch, gooch.
Oh, great. I was going to say, I don't think it's jet lag, right? I don't think it's jet lag from Missouri to St. Louis. So,
well, but yesterday morning, my day started in Winnipeg.
Oh, gosh. Okay. All right.
I'm in New Orleans. So, yeah, it was a long day.
Well, Josh Linville, he's the Director of Fertilizer for StoneX. And, Josh, could you just kind of go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, what your industry experience has been, and a little bit about StoneX and what they do?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've been in the industry now for coming up on 20 years. Spent the better part of a decade, or a little bit over a decade, working for DeBruce Fertilizer. Spent a couple years then working for Coke down in Wichita, actually, where Jeff and I worked together at Tramo. And, we worked together, and actually we're still friends. So that's weird. I mean, Jeff for more than 5 minutes, and usually that's just not the case. Here we are. I still like him.
But I'm feeling the love.
Yeah, working with Jeff or working around Jeff, right? There's different things.
Working at arm's length with Jeff.
You two don't know how fortunate you are.
No, after that, I was over in Melbourne, Australia, director of trade, but came back here and now the director of fertilizer. And, basically we're kind of a broker. We, if there's a paper market in the world, we probably have our hand in it somewhere. Grains and precious metals and interest rates. And I'm working on the fertilizer piece. We're trying to make the fertilizer piece look a lot more like the grain does, but we're basically like it was back in the 60s, 70s. We're nowhere near the grain market today. We got some work to do.
Yeah, it is a very obviously with the date we anchored us in there a little bit. It's there's a lot of topics going on that's concerning all of us today. So we got a few questions we want to ask, but then we'd just like to hear your expertise and insight on everything that's happening.
Yeah, I think the big elephant in the room is probably the Russia-Ukraine. Last time we talked about a lot of things that impact fertilizer and from around the world and how we're a global market. And I think the first thing we need to address is probably this Russian Ukraine war and how that's going to impact the fertilizer industry, farmers in the U.S. Just can you weigh in on that?
Yeah, so a lot of the times, this is something we've been preaching a lot. And trust me, I know when I make these kinds of statements, it's a soapbox deal. It's a preachy type deal. But if I didn't believe it so freaking much, I wouldn't say it. I wouldn't run the risk of upsetting everybody. But something that happens halfway around the world, I don't care where you reside on this globe. It matters to you, whether you want to believe it or not. And what happens in Russia and Ukraine absolutely matters to us here in the U.S. It doesn't matter what part of the Midwest you are on. It is going to affect you. And we were already dealing with a world that was actually fairly snug on fertilizer supplies. We had production issues with COVID going down and shutting all the plants down at the same time for repairs. China hadn't been exporting for quite a while. I mean, all these things, we were dealing with a very, very tight inventory situation already. And very few knew how important Russia was to the world market. They are on the global export total scale, double-digit percentage of those numbers, suppliers. So not only have we already lost Russia or China, well, now we're losing Russia. We are talking anywhere from like 25 to 40% of the global export trade is just now gone until this conflict is done, until we find our new normal. So You know how that goes, farmers. If a product gets tight and there's an opportunity for the market to move up, you know they're going to take that opportunity to move that price up, and they've been doing it very, very well.
I think when this thing started, a lot of people thought, oh, this will last for about 10 days and it'll be over, and then maybe 30 to 60 days later, things get back to normal. Obviously, this thing continues to drudge on, and have you had a chance to think about the long-term effects of what this will do to trade flows, maybe stuff that we aren't even thinking about today?
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing, Jeff. If you think about it right now, let's just say tomorrow morning, Friday, we wake up and news is peace in Ukraine. Putin has come to his senses. He's pulling the troops out immediately. Embarrassing loss, whatever the situation is. It is over. And immediately they drop the sanctions, they drop the trade flow restrictions, they open the airspace, they open the ports to Russia. Everything just goes completely to normal. We're still quite a while before we get back to normal in the fertilizer world. Think about the production, the export that we have lost. I mean, China has been out of the market since last fall. Russia's now been out for quite a while. There are a lot of things. You don't just flip a switch in this fertilizer industry and we go right back to normal. Now, we will see prices drop because all of a sudden the narrative will go from holy crap, we're tight to holy crap, we've just got everything back. And so we will see pressure. But ultimately, it will take a while before we get that supply built back up to a comfortable level. Because right now, guys, we are flying by the skin of our teeth. There is just not a whole lot extra out there.
So basically, we've entered. Boy, that struck home, Josh, when you said that it matters to you. What happens halfway around the world, it matters to you. And what basically happened, I think, what I hear you saying is that it's just there was just a pause. I can't imagine what it's like in the war zone over there, but I mean the mines aren't running, and it's the ships obviously can't be moving normally in the Black Sea or in that area.
Yep.
And so, boy, that really strikes home when you say if everything fixed itself tomorrow, we'd still have this gap of whatever this gap is, and it's going to exist until. I guess give us a time frame, Josh. What do you think?
I don't think we would find a true, and everybody's normal is going to be a little different. For some people, you talk to them and their normal is summer of 2020 pricing. That really, really, really low price that we saw before everything kicked off. Others are saying, listen, I'm not looking for anything like that. I just need lower prices. So it's really a reflection of what do you think your normal is. But for me, I'm just looking for relief on the pricing because where we're at today just doesn't seem like it's sustainable. Even though it sure seems like it's sustainable on a daily basis. But, even if it came back today, I don't think it's something we would see any sort of a reset until we get to the summertime. For the world, that July, August period, that's when we typically see our global resets. It's a seasonal low. That's because there's nobody buying and production continues. That's a chance to catch up on production on supply. So we need something like that. If it goes beyond that, well, now all of a sudden we're entering right back into the demand period. And now we're playing catch up until we get to that next period, or we just have a failure somewhere and we don't need the fertilizer.
Jeff, you made a comment yesterday. We had a meeting yesterday on the same topic, and Jeff mentioned about the what we are discounted to the world about when fertilizer gets to New Orleans and what that discount. Can you explain that a little bit to our listeners about what that means as far as importing whatever fertilizer there is, nitrogen or potash, whatever the fertilizer there is to the United States? What does that mean that we're discounted to the world?
So urea is the example I would use. Everybody thinks, we're dependent or independent here to the rest of the world. We don't need product from the rest of the world. That is not true. This fertilizer year, so July 21 through June 22, we believe that with our demand models, we need to bring in something like 5.6 to 5.7 million tons of urea to meet our demand in the spring. And so we have to be cognizant of what our price is versus the rest of the world. And actually, I always throw a graph up on my presentations where I show the price differential between those two. And when because I think I'm a big steward of, I think every market price is trying to tell us a story. We just have to figure out what that story is. In that price differential, if we are a premium to the world, we're effectively raising our hand to the world and saying we're paying more than anybody else in the world. We will pay you a premium to everybody else. That is us saying we need something. We want something. Send it to us. And when we're a set massive discount, the market is saying, hey, we don't want it. And in fact, there's plenty of other places around the world to go. Don't send it here. We're going to make you pay. We're going to hurt you by sending it here. So when we take a look, was it yesterday or the day before? Egyptian producers sold $1,100 metric ton USD. It was a small block. It was like 6,000 ton, but they sold it. Now the rest of the market's thinking, ooh, I can get to those types of numbers. Now we don't have a tremendous amount that comes from North Africa. Actually, about half of our imports come from the Arab Gulf. But just as an exercise, I'm actually going to run these numbers right now. If you look at $1,100, you put on, say, $45 vessel freight, which is about where it should be. You divide by it by 1.10231. That's your conversion to short ton. Then add just a little bit of money for shrink and interest and DT costs and things like that. And that's probably undervalued today. But let's just say, for the sake of this argument, the cost of a loaded NOLA barge would be $1,045. The last barge I saw trade in the Gulf was $900. So that's where we sit there and say, there is nothing about urea that is cheap. And I'm not going to sit there and say that it is. But when we look at it through that prism, when we look at it through where the rest of the world is, where some of the rest of the world is willing to pay versus our number, we're cheap today.
Is that, I'm sorry, Jeff, one more question. Is that because the dollar is so, the dollar is just beat down right now? Is that a function of that? Is that, or is it?
No, the international fertilizer market works on USD. Everything works on US dollar. It doesn't break down to the respective currency until it actually gets into each industry or each country out there. You see something that trades India, that's in US dollar. When you see something in Egypt, that's US dollar. Now, the international is in metric ton. We always got to keep that in the back of our head. We got to convert that to short ton because we've got to be different than the rest of the world.
Yeah.
We can do anything easy. But, that kind of takes that piece out of it. No, on the urea side, the U.S. is ahead on imports. We brought in far more imports for the first half, actually through January, than we have the last several years. We're well ahead of the curve, which is a great thing when you see what's going on today.
But we still need more. And are we going to get them in time?
Well, and that's the question. When we had prices of urea that were falling off here in January, that was the cry of the bears. They were sitting there saying, we're well ahead. We don't need more. We're going to have too much coming here. There's so much around the world. We're going to get flooded with this stuff. But now they've quietly kind of stepped back and said, crap, we don't need that much. We probably, when you look at April, May, we probably only need about 1.3 million ton. And that sounds like a lot. And it is, don't get me wrong. But versus what we've done in the past, that's not a very big number at all. But now the market narrative has shifted from we're going to get far more than we ever thought we could to crap, can we get 1.2 or 1.3? We don't know with what's going on around the globe. And the narrative changes that quickly. Wow. And when you're a farmer sitting there seeing these retail prices that are changing so often, guys, I can tell you, you're not seeing anywhere near the volatility that happens out there in the marketplace. And the narratives change that quickly. They can change from week to week, day to day. Sometimes it's been hour to hour.
That is true. And you had you told me a number that urea had changed volatility wise. I think it was like something like $1,400 a ton up and down.
Yep.
What was that date range?
Yeah, since January 1st, and actually you can update it. As of, I believe this morning, I think the price of NOLA urea, and when I say volatility, so if the price goes down $50 and the price goes up $50, that's $100. But since January 1, I think the price has moved between $1,400 and $1,500.
Yeah, that's incredible, and
seems impossible.
It's impossible to get out ahead. If as a buyer, as I go out and secure product so that we have it in our sheds when our farmers are ready to go, when it comes to urea, you can be a hero today. Boy, I made a really good buy. And then the next day you look like a total idiot and you should have waited. And then 2 days later, you're back to being a hero again. So it's,
from a hero to a goat, and not the greatest of all time goat either, but the bad goat. Yep.
But nobody wants to really pat me on the back when I'm a hero. They want to remind me when I made a bad buy.
It takes a while to put those statues out up in front of the office. I mean, you get it ordered, then you're goat again, then you got to take it. You know,
I keep thinking any day that statue's going up. So, but we hear a lot about the nitrogen stuff. But what one of the things that I'm starting to look at is what does this fall look like, and kind of getting back to Russia. What I guess if we kind of talked in general, but what about byproduct? Phosphates, potash, and nitrogen. What specifics do you see on a nutrient basis coming out of Russia, and how that's going to impact us?
Just how much of a part of the world market are they? So I always look at it in terms of the global export total. When I look at urea, and I'm going off memory here, so don't string me up if I'm wrong a little bit on this, but I think on urea, they are 14% of the global export total, which is about 7.0 to 7.2 million. We look at phosphate, they are 10 to 11% of the global total. UAN, they are anywhere from 25 to 31% of the global total. Potash, they are almost 20% of the global operating capacity.
is that just Russia, or is that this whole Ukraine? That's
just Russia.
Oh boy.
So here's the fun part. If that's not enough, the one thing that's really scaring me on the back of my mind is what if China, who has been, banning exports since last fall, saying they're going to come back out in the marketplace in June, they're both communist. They're both they're much more or bigger allies, partners they've been. What if China says, you know what? We're not exporting anything for the rest of the year. If you're going to do that to Russia, you're doing that to us. We're going to cut you off. Well, now you look at it. Russia's about 14% of the global urea. China's 10%. Now we're talking a quarter of the global export trade is now gone. UAN, China doesn't export, so it's not a big deal there. Potash, they don't export, same thing. But on the potash side, Belarus is a partner of Russia. They're 15%. So right now you're talking about a third of the global operating capacity is gone. And on phosphate, this is the one that scares me the most. Between 40 and 50% of the global export volume comes from Russia and China alone.
That's a scary thought. And that's one of the things I was talking with some growers here a couple of weeks ago, and I told them, they were curious about fertilizer and what was going to happen this spring and what prices were going to do. And I told them, I said, we'll get through spring. I said, what worries me is looking forward to fall and what our P and K outlook's going to be for fall, because that's in the back of my mind. I was, and of course at that time I thought the Russia ordeal would be quick, 6-10 days and be over with. But so that's been in the back of my mind. I've been worried about that. We talk about potash. We think, well, we've got the Canadians. Can the Canadians take care of all of our needs?
Take care of all of North American needs? Yes. So Canada accounts for about 39-40% of the global total. They are the biggest producer by far. And so if we're looking at it strictly from can they? Yes, they can. But again, we are part of a world market. So what happens if the rest of the world sits there and says, listen, we're getting cut off just the same. We need potash as well. We're willing to start paying a price versus what the U.S. will, versus what Canadian farmers will. Now it turns into a little bit of an auction.
Is there any freight advantages with rail out of Canada, I guess? Does that help us in the U.S. market?
If they're not on strike?
Oh, yeah. You told me that news the other day. Oh, my gosh.
Well, I was going to say, absolutely. But again, it turns in. Yeah, I was going to say the whole CP railroad strike. Yeah, it couldn't happen at a worse time.
Oh, my God.
Probably smart on their part. I mean, they couldn't have picked a better time.
Yeah, that's like the John Deere workers. They picked a time when they were a year and a half deep on orders and said, okay, here's what we want, because that was the time of optimal pressure. The thing we always say in our presentation, supply and demand always comes down to who has more pressure on who wins the negotiation. Wait until the optimal amount of pressure and then strike. John Deere workers did it. CP workers are doing the same thing.
Wow. What about as far as phosphates? I mean, we've all been to phosphate mines in Florida. I mean, what about that production? I mean, is that going to help us at all? But I guess go back to the same point you made, right, Josh? It's a global market.
Yeah, and it is. If the rest of the world's willing to pay more for it, I mean, Mosaic has shown that they will export this stuff. They'll take care of the international market if they're willing to pay more. And I know a lot of people get upset about it, to a certain extent, rightfully so. But they are building these mines and they are producing this product to make money for shareholders. That is their big purpose. And that's just how they look at the world. I don't perspective. That's business.
Yep.
There should be more phosphate rock reserves in Florida. I know there is more phosphate rock reserves in Florida, but the problem is they aren't allowed to go touch it. Because I live down in Florida. That economy runs on three things.
Yeah.
$2 from people going to the beach, tourism dollars from people go to watch rockets take off on the East Coast, and tourism dollars for people going to see Mickey Mouse. Phosphate mining doesn't exactly play on the top 10 list of, tourism dollars.
No, there's only a handful of people want to go to the phosphate mines for their vacation. And we're in that group, right? Well, this is nice.
Yeah. I would say I'm in that group, but I had an opportunity to go tour the mine, and the alternative was getting to go to NASA and see the space shuttle on the launch pad. You better believe I went to go see that shuttle.
It seems like as a fertilizer buyer today, it seems like we're constantly talking about doom and gloom. What's a bright spot out there? And if you don't know of any, make one up. We need something positive, Josh.
So far, the high cost of fertilizer hasn't affected the cost of alcohol.
What? Oh my God. There you go. Right? If you got, what's the saying? When times are good, you drink, and when times are bad, you drink more. Right?
That's right.
Oh my gosh.
No, it's listen, a bull market has to be fed every single day. Once you stop feeding it, it starts to starve. And the most important emotion that we have starts to come into play, and that's fear.
Yeah.
Every dollar that we go higher, I can tell you the fear is growing and growing in this industry, because how many of us were around back in 2008 and held positions for too long and watched that price go from where it was all the way down to the floor? In the back of our minds, the industry is sitting there saying, I will be darned if I'm going to be the one that gets caught with my pants down. So I think that if we get to a period of relative quietness and things stop happening every single day, we stop having new wars and new announcement that certain individuals are now being sanctioned, all this fun stuff that's been going on. When things start to calm down and we don't have these things happening all the time, I think you'll start to see prices fall off. And then, when everybody comes to their senses on the Russia-Ukraine thing, that will make people happier. If we see China starting to export, that will make prices drop. I mean, we are living in a world that seems to be feeding this bull every day. And I just don't think that's sustainable. I don't know that we see the relief through the spring, but, I think by the time we get to the summer, I think things start to calm down a little bit.
Yeah. For our listeners that aren't familiar, maybe not even in the industry, 2008 and 2009, that wasn't similar. Well, Josh, I'll say this, you're the expert, but in layman's terms, the prices ran up really fast and then they came down really fast.
Really fast.
Yes. And for people that had a lot of ownership of the products when they were devalued so quick, it changed the way businesses bought fertilizer. It changed their bylaws. It changed their governance. Yep. And so you're right, Josh. Those that remember that, they don't want that hickey again. It was millions of dollars. So.
But the big difference is, and you're right, when you look at it just on a graph, and I've had a lot of Wall Street people and things like that do this. They look at the past history and say, this is exactly what's going to happen. Prices are going to fall out of bed. It's like, that's exactly what you should be doing. We look to history to make sure we don't repeat the sins of the past. That's where we learn. But the 08-09 system was different. The price run-up was very, very similar, but it was a demand-driven bull run.
Yeah.
If you remember this, there was never a problem finding product. Now, you may have to pay a higher price, but you could always find that product. That was a demand-driven bull run. And as long as you feed that bull every day, it's healthy. But when we got to the top, we stopped feeding it. and fear crept in and prices lowered. And then they got more fearful and they lowered it. And there was no getting out of the way because there was still product available. Today, this has been a supply-driven marketplace. You don't have to feed a supply-driven bull run every single day like you did on the other side. And that's what we saw when things went quiet. Yeah, we saw prices drop off a little bit, but nowhere near to the extent because that fundamental floor was still there saying, guys, there's not enough to go around. We're tight. We have never in the history of fertilizer ever dealt with a situation like this. We've always theorized what would we do in a very, very tight marketplace or a marketplace that doesn't have enough supply for the demand, but we've never actually dealt with it. This is a different beast altogether.
Wow.
Yeah, I agree. That's there's people that try to draw a lot of similarities and to the 08, 09 run up, and from a standpoint, prices got higher. You're correct, and but it was different, and it's harder when it's a supply driven issue, and compared to demand driven. So
you don't have to feed it. That's what I just wrote that note down. You don't have to feed this one.
Well, and it makes it so much harder, about trying to make that next decision. Back then, it was, well, if I buy it, it may go up $100, and that'd be good. Or if I buy it, and it goes down $100, it's bad. And now it's, can I buy it? Can I source it? What's the price going to be? Or is it, I don't know how many emails I've gotten this year that everybody pulls all offers off the table. And so when you're out there trying to source product and at Premier Ag, we spend a lot of time trying to know what's going on in the world market and try to make good decisions and make sure that we have product available at a competitive price for our growers. And it's hard. I rely on Josh here. He's in communication with me every day, whether it's email or sometimes when it gets really bad, I just call him. And but trying to get the information that you need to make that next decision, and then when you get ready to make that decision, you find out, hey, everybody's pulled their offers, we can't buy today. Then it's like, okay, back to the drawing board. It's been and it's not just fertilizer. We've got a great team with Mark and Canary and David Prim trying to do the same thing on the chemical side. So it's been a challenging year.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, from a grower perspective, our end users of the products, they don't get to see all the man hours and labor and I hate to brag about a guy right across the table from me, but they don't get to see trying to weigh our shareholders' equity with our business and protecting our balance sheet with committing and purchasing things that we don't have a commitment for yet. We know it's going to be there. But at what time do you have market erosion from the prices too? So can I change the topic just a little bit? I want to. You said something the other day that really struck me: countervailing duties. What?
I learned that term from Josh.
Okay. We throw it.
Sounds impressive.
We sure throw it around, and it does. And I'm not even sure I got it spelled right. But what is a countervailing duty, and how does that impact us?
So there's actually been, on the phosphate side, there was a countervailing duty that was placed against Morocco and Russia. What that is saying is that basically there is unfair trade practices. The basis for it when Mosaic called for it against Russia was that they have a multi-tiered gas system. It's ran by the oligopolies. And so the producers were getting a much, much cheaper gas price than some of the other industries and some of the other competitors out there. They were saying it was unfair. When they looked at Morocco, they said, listen, the country of Morocco is owned by the royal family. And the royal family is basically just giving them the phosphate rock. And then like the gypsum, the byproduct of phosphate production, they're not even capping it and stacking it or anything. They just dump the stuff in the ocean. It's basically saying, listen, the world is dealing with unfair trade practices from our point of view. If you're going to uphold us to a higher standard, which Mosaic is, and this is the one thing where I will back them and sit there and say they absolutely are. They have to stack their gypsum. They have to put dikes around it. They have to, contain it and do all this extra work. And it took millions and millions of dollars to do so. And to compete with somebody halfway around the world who doesn't have to worry about any of that stuff, it's unfair. That's also part of what the CF case on UAN was against Trinidad and Russia. But they also had an anti-dumping rate. What that means is that you are willing to sell it to a destination cheaper than what you can sell it at home for. And that is where the big rates came from. They sat there and said, that's what's going on with Trinidad, and that's what's going on with Russia. And that's why those two countries, unless this thing gets overturned this summer, and unfortunately, guys, that's a very, very low probability of happening, they're not coming here, not at the rates that we set against them.
So when you produce fertilizer, phosphate, let's use that example, a byproduct is gypsum, correct? And then
with a real slight radioactive tinge. So it's not like gypsum you can go spread to the field. It's a gypsum you got to stack and contain and, squirrel away from the rest of the world. And
in this country, we do that. We contain it, we stack it. And in other countries, I'd never thought about what they do with the byproducts. And so that would make a big difference on, one country playing by the rules and another country not. That's a great explanation. So thank you for educating us on that.
I guess speak to the fact that, Josh, that these aren't just 1 year deals.
No.
They run for 5 years, I believe.
Yep.
And I had an interesting question yesterday from one of our account managers. Is it possible that once let's say on phosphate, as the world market changes, could that countervailing duty go away prior to the run out of the 5-year term?
So it can be reviewed, but the problem is they are still looking at the information that was provided, and the information that was provided is prior to the run up of all this stuff. The DOC and the ITC is not looking at it from the prism of what's going on today. They are looking at it in terms of what happened to the lead up to the lowest prices we saw that summer of 2020. Now, that said, like on the phosphate case, I believe Morocco is suing on one side that they need to relook at it and lower the rate. Mosaic's on the other side saying you need to relook at this and actually raise the rate. We don't think it was high enough. Corporate America, the court system isn't so much about who's right or who's wrong. It's more about who has the deeper pockets. There's a book that talks about the story of the original owners, like McDonald's. There was a partnership. One guy actually had more ownership of it, and the other one tried to take it from him. He's like, "I'm going to take you to court." He's like, "That's fine. Take me to court. I will bankrupt you before you win this case." How it goes. And to their credit, that's exactly what Mosaic is going to try and do. They're going to try and string this thing out as long as possible, because the longer it goes on, the more they get the rate. Now, a lot of people have been asking, well, what can DC do? Can they just step in and say, no, this isn't going to happen anymore? They can, I believe they can ask for a pause, a stay on it, drop it for 6 months, help us return back to normal, and then revisit it. But and I'm not completely sure. I'm not great at the whole with talking points, the lawyer and all that fun stuff. But that's how I understand it. But even from that point, take the phosphate, for example. There are other countries that are still paying far more than what countries could sell, bringing it to the U.S. marketplace today. We're cheap. And so even if they were to drop that duty, our imports would probably pick up. Because there's going to be, you take Morocco, for example, they're not real happy with Mosaic, and there'd probably be some FU funds that get sent to the U.S. But ultimately, by and large, from a profitability standpoint, I still wouldn't send anything to the U.S. I'd go other places around the world.
Wow.
So I guess the follow-up to that is, what's your predictions on summer reset on NP and K?
Oh, shoot. At this point,
Is this where you have that magic 8 ball?
This is being recorded too, Josh. We'll play this back to you at some time.
No, I do think there was going to be a reset. I think that right now we are in the middle of the hurricane. We're in the eye of the storm. We are as in the middle of it as you possibly can. It's really hard to see your way out. You always think, my God, prices are going to go up and to the right, and always they're going to go up to the right. We thought the same thing in 2008, and look where that got us. I think that by the time we do get to the summertime, things slow down. I think that we'll see some resets. I think that we'll see some need to sell stuff. Where that reset is, it's not going to be anywhere near those 2020 values. I mean, people are sitting there saying, oh, we're going back to that. No, we're not. Is there a way that we get there in the cards? Maybe there's one route, but guys, that means there are hundreds of routes where we're nowhere near it. don't expect prices to fall off significantly. I think we're going to come through this spring. I think we're going to have a tremendous demand. You look at like corn, for example, December 22 corn continues to float around like that 640 type number. That's a really good number. And as much as everybody's saying, oh, I'm going to cut back, I'm not going to plant as much. Guys, if I'm farming, I'm out there with a ruler trying to figure out how close to the fence I can run that planter. Yeah. I'm talking to the state to ask, hey, can you pull out those stupid wires from the middle of the interstate system and let me run my planter down the
right
middle
down the center? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that brings us to kind of our last topic. Really, is the planting season in Ukraine. I didn't realize what a food exporter, what a grain exporter that Ukraine can be. And Jeff told us yesterday that it's significant in wheat, certainly, and corn. And so now we're on a topic that affects every single one of us. Like. Yep. Even the others did, but this goes to the grocery stores. This goes to everything. So can you kind of summarize what that looks like with their planting season, which is right now, I believe, or coming close, Jeff? Is that correct?
Very close.
Yeah, I think they run fairly similar to our season, don't they?
Yep. They're Northern Hemisphere, so their spring is coming up. And I don't know, it's a lot of speculation. A lot of people are saying, oh, the seed was already there. The fertilizer was there. All these things were already in place. They're going to farm. The focus of the Russian army and the fighting is in the cities. I agree with that. But two counterpoints I always make to it. Number one, how are you going to move that product? It's kind of like here. Imagine we were in the middle of a war with Russia, and Russia's sitting in on U.S. soil, and all of our product is sitting in the Gulf of Mexico. How confident are you that you're going to get that seed delivered, that fertilizer delivered, that chemical delivered? There's a damn war going on, guys. Yeah. You're going to worry about saying, oh, yeah, no, go ahead and ship that. The other side of it is, who's going to do it? Every Ukrainian is stepping up and fighting this war. I mean, my God, you've got videos of farmers in Ukraine hooking their tractors up to the tank and hauling them off. They are a part of the resistance.
Yeah.
If God bless them. Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it's been amazing. Not only it has been amazing to see the Ukrainian people stand up like they have, it has been amazing to me to see the world stand up and unify like they have. And it's not just governments, it's companies. I mean, companies do not want to sit there and hurt their bottom line. But I mean, yesterday I was reading it like, what was it? Visa shut down their services. McDonald's was shutting down their stores. Everybody's getting in on this and saying, this is not right. I am shocked. I did not think we would ever see this kind of a unified response. It's actually kind of heartening. We've always said if there's another world war, will we actually come together and fight it? Under the right circumstances, yes, we will.
That's that's awesome. I mean, you think about it in those terms, not awesome. That's just the fact that can be a significant deterrent. I mean, if the whole world gets involved, and maybe it's not militarily, but maybe it's financially. I mean, you can crush a country and an aggressor in this case. And and you're right, Josh. That brings it home. What would we do, right? We'd be cleaning our gun cases out and heading down there with everything from 22 long rifles to all the crazy stuff Jeff's probably got in his gun safe. So. But
way to go! I'm probably marked.
Oh gosh,
I'm a marked man.
No, Jeff used to have a nice collection, but he took it on a boating trip and it sunk.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh no,
exactly.
Yeah,
it's Josh's boat sunk right next to mine. I mean, it was so.
Yeah, it's damned as deal. I've never seen it.
Yes. Oh shoot. Well, on that note, Jeff, what else do we need? I know, that Josh can't thank you enough. That was a lot of good information. And Jeff and Scott Sharp, they both share their insights here with us locally, and they glean it from a lot of folks. And we know you're a big part of our connection and intelligence and insight to the whole industry. Any other comments from StoneX perspective or from your personal perspective?
Listen. Soapbox one, this isn't me trying to tell anybody what to do, but guys, it's really easy to be anxious. It's really easy to be angry. Don't let emotion creep into your decision making. When it comes down to it, and Jeff, I'll expect the check in the mail later. I'll give you my mailing address. Guys, you need to be talking to your supplier.
Yep.
You need to be talking to your supplier more than you ever have because you're scared to death of buying this and seeing it fall to the floor. Well, guess what? Jeff and his team is scared to death of buying it, seeing it fall to the floor. The people that service them, that sell them physical product, are scared to death of buying it and seeing it fall to the floor. This entire value chain is scared. Fear is a huge thing. I actually saw somebody write this. What was it? There is more of an emotional response of you fear losing $10 more than you get excited for making 20.
Yep.
Fear is the single biggest thing. And so we need to keep that in the back of our mind. We cannot always, completely do away with it. But when it comes time to make a decision, guys, sit down, calmly, cool, collected, take a look at it, look at what the numbers are telling you, let the numbers make those decisions.
And that's good advice all the way down to the growers and
Absolutely.
for all of us. So, well, Jeff, if there's nothing else.
No, Josh, can't thank you enough. Appreciate your comments, and we appreciate the information that you glean from the industry to help us make more informed decisions.
Absolutely. Always happy to be on. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Josh. And
Thanks, Josh.
That concludes another episode of The High Ground powered by Premier Companies. Thank you all for listening.